coffee had gone cold before I realized I had been standing there for almost 20 minutes. I was staring out the kitchen window at the backyard fence Harold built in 1989. White wood, crooked in a few places now, the paint peeling near the gate. I kept meaning to fix it, or pay someone to fix it, but after the stroke I moved slower. Everything moved slower. The kettle was still hissing softly behind me. I turned it off with my left hand, because my right hand still trembled sometimes. Not enough for strangers to notice. Enough for me to notice every second of every day. It was late October. Gray outside. Wet leaves stuck to the patio stones. My daughter Emily was supposed to come by around noon with groceries. She had been helping me ever since the stroke 6 months earlier. That was the story I told people anyway. My name is Patricia. Most people call me Pat. I was 68 years old when my daughter sold my house without telling me. Even now, I still hate saying those words out loud because they sound impossible. They sound like something from a daytime TV show, something trashy and dramatic, not something that happens to women who spent 40 years packing school lunches and clipping coupons and sitting in cold bleachers watching softball games. Not something that happens to mothers. I used to think betrayal came loudly. I thought it looked like screaming and slammed doors and lipstick on collars. I was wrong. Real betrayal is quiet. It smiles at you while making your soup. Emily had always been my difficult child. Not bad, just restless, sensitive, angry at the world in ways I never fully understood. When she was 14, she used to lock herself in her room for hours blasting music through the walls. At 16, she totaled my Honda Civic because she was texting while driving. At 23, she married a man named Greg after knowing him for 7 months because she said she was tired of struggling alone. I helped them buy their first washer and dryer, then their second one, after Greg lost his construction job during the recession. Then diapers, school clothes, rent payments, Christmas gifts they pretended came from Santa, even though I knew damn well they came from my retirement account. I never complained. That is the thing nobody tells you about motherhood. It becomes your identity so completely that you stop noticing when love turns into obligation. You stop seeing the line. Harold used to notice. My husband had a way of looking at me across the dinner table without saying anything. One raised eyebrow, one little sigh. That was enough. You are doing too much again, Pat. He died 5 years before the stroke. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal. One Thanksgiving, he was carving turkey. By Easter, he was ashes in a wooden box on my dresser. After he died, the house became too quiet. Emily started visiting more often after that. At first it felt comforting. She would bring over takeout and sit at the kitchen counter drinking wine while talking about her teenagers. Her son Tyler getting suspended. Her daughter Madison sneaking around with boys. Greg working late all the time. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes I did too. Those nights made me feel useful again. Needed. I babysat the grandkids constantly back then. Sleepovers every weekend. Soccer practices. Picking them up from school. I kept spare toothbrushes in the bathroom drawer and little juice boxes in the fridge. I remember one night, Madison fell asleep against my shoulder while we watched old movies. She was 12 maybe. Warm little body curled against me. I remember thinking this is what life is. This right here. Family, noise, mess, love. Funny how memories turn poisonous later. The stroke happened on a Tuesday morning in April. I was folding towels. That is what I remember most clearly. Warm towels fresh from the dryer, blue ones on top. Then suddenly, my arm stopped working right. The room tilted sideways. I tried calling Emily, but my mouth wouldn't form the words properly. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. Emily was there holding my hand. Mom, oh thank God. Her mascara was smeared. She looked exhausted, loving, terrified. Greg stood near the window, staring at his phone. The doctor explained things slowly. Mild stroke, some weakness, some cognitive confusion. I would recover mostly, but I needed help for a while. Emily immediately stepped in. I can stay with her. I remember feeling grateful, so deeply it hurt. For the next few weeks, she practically ran my life. Doctor appointments, medication schedules, grocery shopping, bills. I trusted her completely because she was my daughter. That sentence alone should terrify every parent listening to this story. The first strange thing happened about a month later. I was sitting in my recliner half asleep when Emily walked into the hallway whispering on the phone. No, she won't notice. A pause, because she can't even drive right now, Greg. Then silence. I remember opening my eyes fully, my heart beating harder. But when she walked back into the living room, she smiled normally. "You need anything, Mom?" I almost asked her about the phone call. I didn't. That became the pattern. Little moments, tiny cracks. One afternoon, I noticed a stack of paperwork on the dining room table. Real estate documents. I only caught a glimpse before Emily quickly gathered them up. Just refinancing stuff for our house. She smiled too quickly. I believed her because I wanted to. That is another thing. Nobody tells you about betrayal. Sometimes the victim helps build it, brick by brick, because the truth feels unbearable. My recovery took longer than expected. I couldn't drive for nearly 3 months. Emily had access to everything by then. My banking apps, my insurance information, even my safe deposit key, because she said she needed to organize my paperwork. One night, Greg drove me home from physical therapy because Emily had a migraine. We sat in silence most of the ride. Then suddenly, he said, "You know, Emily worries about you a lot." I nodded. "She thinks this house is too much for you now." The words landed strangely. Too much how? Too expensive. Too big. Dangerous for someone alone. I looked out the window at passing trees. This house was paid off 20 years ago. Greg tightened his jaw slightly. Still, maintenance and taxes and everything. I said nothing after that, but something cold settled into my stomach. The next morning, I shuffled into the kitchen earlier than usual and heard Emily talking softly to someone. "The market is still hot. We could probably close fast." Silence. "No, she signed the power of attorney already." I froze. Every nerve in my body woke up at once. The tile floor felt ice cold beneath my feet. Emily turned around and nearly dropped her coffee mug. "Mom, you scared me. What power of attorney?" Her face changed for half a second. Tiny, almost invisible, but I saw it. Then she smiled. "Just temporary medical paperwork from the hospital." Remember? I didn't remember. After the stroke, there were gaps in my memory, fuzzy edges around certain days. She stepped closer. "You signed a bunch of forms back then. It was only in case you couldn't make decisions for yourself." I wanted to ask more questions, but suddenly I felt tired, embarrassed, old. That is how they get you sometimes. Not through force, through exhaustion. Weeks passed. I started improving physically, walking more steadily, cooking small meals again. I even drove around the block, once, despite doctor's orders. I felt proud of myself. Emily seemed irritated by my progress. That sounds horrible to say. I know how it sounds, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. Every time I talked about getting independent again, she got tense. "Maybe you should wait a little longer before driving. Maybe you should think about assisted living eventually. Maybe it would be easier to sell this place." Sell, that word kept appearing, like a fly buzzing around my head. One afternoon, I went looking for my property tax records because I wanted to check something. The filing cabinet in Harold's old office was locked. Locked? It had never been locked before in 40 years. I stood there staring at it. When Emily came over later, I asked casually where the key was. She hesitated. "Oh, Greg borrowed it because he was organizing your financial stuff." "Why would Greg organize my financial stuff?" She laughed nervously. "Because you hate paperwork, Mom." I did hate paperwork, but suddenly, that answer didn't feel cute anymore. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my head. The phone calls, the documents, the way Emily watched me sometimes when she thought I wasn't paying attention, like she was measuring something. 3 days later, I found the first real proof. Pure accident. Emily had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran upstairs to shower after helping me clean the garage. I wasn't snooping. God help me, I truly wasn't. I just walked past and saw my address. Large, bold letters. Property sale agreement. My blood went cold. I sat down slowly. There it was. Buyer information. Closing date. Realtor details. And my electronic signature at the bottom. My signature. Only it wasn't mine. Not really. It looked shaky and distorted, like someone trying to copy my handwriting while half drunk. I remember hearing the shower upstairs running. Water through pipes. Ordinary sounds. Meanwhile, my entire world was collapsing silently at a kitchen counter. I clicked through more files with trembling fingers. The house had already been sold. 3 weeks earlier. I stopped breathing for a second. Actually stopped. The room tilted. There was more. Emily and Greg had been planning to move me into a long-term care facility outside town after the sale finalized. The money from the house was already transferred into a separate account under her control through the power of attorney. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I saw one email that shattered something deeper than anger. Greg wrote, "Honestly, Pat probably won't even understand what's happening by then." That sentence destroyed me more than the theft. Not the money, not the house, the humiliation, the reduction of my entire life into an inconvenience. I heard the shower turn off upstairs and quickly closed the laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the lid. I sat back in the recliner, pretending to watch television. Emily came downstairs, toweling her hair. "You okay, Mom?" I looked at her face, the same face I kissed after nightmares, the same face I sat beside in emergency rooms, the same face I defended when teachers called her difficult. And suddenly, I realized I did not know this woman at all. That night after she left, I cried so hard my chest hurt. Not loud crying, old person crying, quiet, exhausted, like your body cannot survive another disappointment. I kept walking from room to room, touching things. Harold's chair, the kitchen counter where we measured the kids' heights, the crack in the hallway wall from when Tyler threw a baseball inside at age 9. This house was my life, and my daughter had sold it like a used appliance. The next morning, I called an attorney named Richard Levinson, whose billboard I used to pass on the highway. I almost hung up 3 times before speaking. My voice sounded tiny, like someone else's. He met me that afternoon. Small office, brown carpet, coffee stains on paperwork. He listened quietly while I explained everything. Then he asked one question. "Mrs. Holloway, did you knowingly authorize the sale of your home?" "No." He leaned back slowly. "Then your daughter may have committed fraud." Fraud, such a clean, cold word for something that felt like murder. Over the next few weeks, my life turned into meetings and paperwork and panic attacks. Richard uncovered everything piece by piece. Emily had used the temporary power of attorney far beyond its legal limits. She claimed cognitive decline, claimed I was incapable of managing finances. She and Greg rushed the sale through during a period when my medical records showed impaired speech and confusion after the stroke. Technically clever, morally disgusting. The buyers had already moved in, a young couple expecting a baby. They had no idea. I remember sitting in Richard's office while he explained the legal complications. "You may recover financial damages, but getting the actual house back will be difficult." I nodded numbly. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. Emily called constantly during that time, at first cheerful, then nervous, then angry when I stopped answering. Finally, she showed up at my door one evening unannounced. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I stood in the hallway, gripping my cane. "You tell me, Emily." Her face flushed red instantly. "Greg says you've been talking to lawyers. You sold my house." Silence. She looked away first. "Mom, we were trying to help you." "Help me? You couldn't take care of yourself anymore." I took a shaky breath. "So you stole from me." "We did not steal from you." Her voice got louder. "We spent years helping you. Years. Do you know how much money we've poured into this family?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Into this family?" Emily laughed bitterly. "You always make yourself the victim." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because suddenly I realized she truly believed it. In her mind, I was selfish for wanting ownership of my own life. We argued for almost an hour. Ugly things came out. She accused me of loving Harold more than her, of helping her brother financially more often growing up, of making her feel second best her entire childhood. Some accusations were ridiculous. Some were painfully true. That was the worst part. Real family betrayals are never clean. Everyone carries old wounds into the fire. Finally, she broke down crying. "We were drowning financially, Mom. Greg lost so much money. Tyler got arrested. Madison's tuition. Everything was falling apart. Why didn't you just ask me?" "Because you would have said no." The honesty of that answer stunned me. She wiped her face angrily. "You don't understand what it's like to be scared all the time." I looked at my daughter, standing in my hallway at 43 years old, and for one tiny second, I saw the little girl she used to be. Skinny knees, tear-stained cheeks, always afraid of not having enough love. Then it vanished again. "You still had no right." She left after that, slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I picked it up slowly afterward. Family photo from Disney World in 1998. Everyone sunburned and smiling. I almost threw it away. The lawsuit dragged on for months. Neighbors found out eventually, because neighbors always find out. Nothing humiliates you quite like suburban gossip. Women who used to wave warmly at me in grocery stores suddenly spoke softer around me. Men avoided eye contact. I became the old woman who whose daughter stole her house. Like that was my identity now. Tyler stopped answering my calls completely. Madison sent one text. Mom says you're trying to destroy the family. Destroy the family. I sat in my car outside Target reading that message over and over until my vision blurred. Meanwhile, Emily painted herself as overwhelmed and misunderstood to anyone who would listen. Maybe she even believed it. I don't know anymore. The loneliness became physical. That is the only way I can describe it. Physical, like a second illness, growing inside your body. Thanksgiving came and went with silence. Christmas too. I bought a tiny artificial tree for my apartment because by then I had already moved out of the house. Not by choice. The new owners legally lived there now, while the case crawled through court. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a dental office. Thin walls, smell of bleach everywhere. At night I could hear traffic instead of crickets. Sometimes I drove past my old house just to look at it. The young couple painted the shutters black. They put a swing set in the backyard. One afternoon, I saw a little girl pressing handprints against the front window where my grandchildren used to stand. I cried so hard, I had to pull over 2 streets away. Richard eventually negotiated a settlement, substantial financial compensation, criminal charges avoided if Emily repaid portions voluntarily. He said it was probably the best outcome possible. I felt nothing hearing it. Money could not restore trust, or time, or dignity. Around that same period, my younger brother Daniel called after years of barely speaking. He had heard about everything. "You okay, Pat?" Such a simple question. I broke apart hearing it. We talked for almost 3 hours that night. About Harold, about childhood, about how lonely aging becomes in America. Everyone scatters. Everyone gets busy. Then suddenly, you are old and disposable. A burden people manage instead of love. Daniel told me something I still think about. People don't usually betray strangers, Pat. They betray access. I understood exactly what he meant. Only people close enough to your heart can destroy it properly. A few weeks later, I changed my will. Not out of revenge at first. At least that is what I told myself. But maybe revenge was part of it. Maybe hurt old women deserve revenge sometimes. Richard handled everything quietly. My estate, savings, insurance, the remaining settlement money. Most of it went elsewhere. Veterans charities, because Harold served in Vietnam. A local literacy foundation. A women's shelter. Daniel's daughter Claire, who had called me every single week through the lawsuit, even though we barely knew each other before. Emily received almost nothing. A small amount only. Enough that nobody could argue she was accidentally omitted. I remember signing the new documents with steady hands. Stronger hands than 6 months earlier. Richard asked gently, "Are you sure?" Yes. And for the first time since the stroke, I actually meant something completely. 6 months later, Emily showed up again. It was raining. Hard rain. Cold January rain hitting the windows. I opened the door and barely recognized her. She looked thinner, exhausted, mascara smudged, same as the hospital months earlier, except now there was no tenderness left between us. Greg left. I said nothing. She stood there dripping rainwater onto the welcome mat. "Can I come in?" I should have said no. I didn't. We sat at the kitchen table, in silence for almost a minute. My apartment suddenly felt very small. Finally she spoke. "Tyler got another DUI. I nodded slightly. "Greg moved out last month." Still silent. Then her eyes filled. "I know you changed the will." Of course she knew. People always find out eventually. She stared at the table. "You really hate me that much?" The question cut deeper than I expected, because hate was not what I felt. Hatred has energy. What I felt was grief. "No, Emily, I don't hate you." "Then why would you do this?" I laughed softly before I could stop myself. Why would I do this? The irony nearly choked me. She started crying then. Real crying, shoulders shaking, 43 years old, and suddenly looking like a lost child again. "I made mistakes, Mom. You stole my home. We needed help. You could have asked. You always controlled everything." That stunned me. Controlled. I spent decades sacrificing for these people, and somehow in her mind that became control. She looked up finally. "I thought eventually you'd understand." Understand what? That we were desperate. I leaned back slowly. "Emily, do you know what hurt most?" She stayed silent. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even the money. My voice cracked. It was reading that email where Greg said I probably wouldn't understand what was happening. She closed her eyes instantly, like she knew exactly which email. I swallowed hard. Do you know what that feels like? To realize your own child sees you as already halfway gone. Tears rolled down her face. We sat there a long time after that. No screaming anymore, just ruins. Eventually, she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. I was scared all the time. And suddenly, I believed her. That was the terrible part. I believed her fear was real. Debt, failing marriage, children spiraling, middle age crushing her slowly. But fear does not excuse cruelty. It just explains it. Before leaving, she stood near the door awkwardly. Are you ever gonna forgive me? I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know. Honest answer. Maybe the only honest answer possible. After she left, I stood by the window, watching her walk through the rain toward her car. For one split second, I almost ran after her, almost called her back, because mothers are stupid that way, even broken mothers. But I stayed still. Months passed after that. We spoke occasionally, short calls, holidays sometimes, careful conversations that avoided the wound sitting between us. Things never returned to normal. How could they? Trust once shattered in families never really grows back the same way. It grows crooked, scarred, like badly healed bones. Last spring, I drove past my old house again. The little girl who lived there now was drawing chalk flowers on the driveway. Her mother sat on the porch drinking iced tea. Ordinary life. My life once. I parked across the street for a while, just watching. Then something strange happened. I realized I no longer wanted the house back. Not because the pain disappeared. It didn't. But because the house had become a graveyard in my mind. Haunted by who we used to be. Harold used to say homes are just wood and nails until people fill them with love. Maybe he was right. And maybe, once love rots away, all you have left is lumber. I still live in the apartment above the dental office. I drink coffee too late at night sometimes. I watch old sitcom reruns. I take longer walks now because my right leg finally improved. Emily calls every couple weeks. Sometimes we even laugh. Then one strange silence falls between us, and both of us remember exactly who we are to each other now. Mother, daughter, victim, thief. I don't think people understand how complicated betrayal becomes when blood is involved. If a stranger robs you, then you call the police. If your child robs you, then part of you still worries whether they ate dinner. That is the sickness of motherhood. A few months ago, Madison visited unexpectedly. She is 21 now, taller than Emily. Same eyes, though. She sat on my couch, twisting her hands nervously. Mom told us everything wrong. I stayed quiet. Madison started crying almost immediately. I thought you abandoned us. God, that sentence nearly stopped my heart. We talked for hours. Turns out, Emily told the kids I cut the family off over money, that I cared more about property than people. Maybe that version was easier for her to live with. Madison hugged me before leaving. Real hug. Tight, trembling. I had forgotten what genuine affection felt like. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, holding the coffee mug she used and crying into my hands. Not because things were fixed, because they weren't. Because generations of damage move through families like weather systems, invisible until everything floods. Sometimes late at night, I replay every decision I made as a mother. Did I help too much? Did I love wrong? Did I teach dependence instead of strength? I don't know. Old age strips away certainty first. That is what nobody warns you about. Not wrinkles, not illness, certainty. You spend your whole life believing love protects people from becoming cruel. Then one day you realize love only gives them closer access to the knife. Last week, Emily called while I was grocery shopping. I almost ignored it, but I answered. She sounded tired. Mom, I just wanted to hear your voice. I stood near the frozen foods, staring at bags of peas, while strangers pushed carts around me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then quietly I said, I'm here. That was all. No forgiveness speech, no dramatic healing, just two exhausted women, connected by blood and damage and history. When we hung up, I sat in my car for nearly an hour afterward, rain tapping softly against the windshield, thinking about how strange life becomes near the end. You imagine aging, surrounded by family, grandchildren visiting, warm kitchens, shared holidays. Nobody imagines legal documents and betrayal and empty apartments. Nobody imagines changing their will because their own child treated them like a dying inconvenience. But maybe this story is more common than people admit. Maybe there are thousands of women like me sitting quietly in condos and nursing homes and small apartments right now wondering where exactly love went wrong. I still keep one photo of Emily as a little girl beside my bed, gap-toothed smile, holding a popsicle bigger than her hand. Sometimes before sleeping, I stare at that picture and try to understand how that child became the woman who sold my house while I was relearning how to walk. I never find the answer. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe people don't transform all at once. Maybe betrayal grows slowly in ordinary places until one day it finally introduces itself. The coffee always goes cold before I finish it these days. I forget things more often now. Doctor says that happens. Age, stress, small lingering damage from the stroke. Sometimes I sit by the window watching headlights move through the rain and wonder what Harold would say if he saw what became of us after he died. I think part of him would blame me. Part of him would blame Emily. Most of him would probably just feel sad. That is where I live now mostly. Not in anger, not even in hatred, just sadness, heavy and permanent, like carrying a wet coat everywhere you go. And the worst part is this: if Emily called me tonight crying for help again, I would still answer.